All right, we're back for another episode of Beyond Barriers. Beyond Barriers is a conversation with leaders and community evangelists about the challenges of navigating an effective accessibility strategy. In these episodes, guests get to share their journey of successes and setbacks with a primary focus on how they've overcome specific issues that otherwise could have ended that journey. My name is Brian Gavin. I'm the co founder of Wally. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Michael Vanderheyden. Michael, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Um, I always enjoy getting to talk with folks around the world, and you get to sit on one of those seats where we're not in the one another's backyard. And so, thank you for making the time today, and I'm really excited to get to dive into a little bit of your experience, so that we can give the guests that are listening to today's episode a little bit of an understanding about who you are. Why don't you dive into your journey and experiencing the accessibility space?
Yeah, sure. So I actually started working in the IT department in early 2004. And already in my first job, the task was basically to convert legacy desktop application to a web application for German administration. And back then, it was already mandatory for those applications to be accessible. Um, the requirement back then were a bit easier, so it was really a bit easier and at the same time more difficult at the time because application had to be compatible to WCAG 1. And it was much easier for two reasons. First of all, the capabilities of the web, the complexity of the stuff you can do with CSS or even with JavaScript was far less than what you can achieve today, which meant that you had to rely much more on native element of the webs, which are per se accessible. On the other hand, it was more complicated because there was far less expertise. It was not, the tooling was not as advanced as it is today for test automation, for instance. And there were far less people experienced with the topic. But nevertheless, this was really a good experience to learn about accessibility, to learn about or to work with people with disabilities to actually make that application accessible. And it was a great opportunity to learn. And from there, it's just being increasingly challenging. I think in end of 2007, and I got a new job, a new company, where I did at first a few projects where accessibility was always a bit of a topic, but not the main purpose. And at some point, we were creating collaboration and communication software on WebRTC, and my team got tasked with the job to try and make that application accessible. And that was actually a double challenge because, first of all, we had to make that application accessible after the fact, which is always, what's considered a bad practice because it's much more complicated to achieve than when you have it beforehand. And on the other hand, a communication and collaboration application relies on heavily dynamic UI. So it's not just creating a simple form or a simple web page where you have to be a bit aware of the semantics and stuff like that, but you have chat messages popping up, you have notification, you have incoming calls, you have audio, you have video. So every those live changes where you have to find the right balance between notifying the user without taking him out of the context or annoying him too much. So that was really a challenge, and we worked almost 2 years on that without ever reaching a fully accessible application. And unfortunately, the company decided to sell the software because we had a chance to finish that task. But we took, or at least I took with my team a lot of learnings from that journey, and we worked with a lot of tools, with a lot of people. We learned especially to try and identify issues, also prioritize issues, and it was really a great learning experience in that matter. And from there, I've been basically increasing my focus on accessibility with every project. Doing for different customers consulting, also internally in the company, I've been doing some mentoring, trying to get more developers involved in the topic, and even trying to get certified and keep learning into the area. And yeah.
Can I interject for one quick second? I was just going to ask, it was so getting into this space and working on accessibility back in 2004 and now 20 years later, is there what drives the underlying passion, or most folks are that join the podcast are deeply passionate about the space, but there's generally something that kind of drove that initiative and that desire to become a specialist in this area.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a belief thing. I think innately that accessibility and user experience or usability are two topics that go absolutely together and intertwine. And I'm really passionate about creating and trying to create for users really great user experience, generate great UIs, and I think that accessibility, in my opinion, is something that belongs in that area and that you cannot cut out of it. Because in the end, if you create a good and an accessible solution, it's a benefit for everybody, because you never know in what kind of situation the user is going to be. It doesn't have to be a permanent disability or something like that. It could be situational, or even just a preference. Starting with simple stuff. A topic that's been, for instance, very popular in the last few years is the dark mode. I think that especially for developers, I guess dark mode is a preference for many developers, but it has also its advantage in the scope of accessibility. If you are working, for instance, in a dark room or a very bright room or something like that, and directly under the sunlight, being able to switch between a light mode and a dark mode is a great benefit. And it starts with a preference or maybe with an accessible requirement, and in the end of the day, everybody benefits from it.
And so now over time, you said you've increased your accessibility focus, but you've also become an internal champion to help educate. Walk me through what that's like. Is that something that you're able to provide exposure to employees who join early on? Or is this something that, how have you incorporated the internal awareness in education?
I'd say that I actually started pretty small within my own team. Trying to get the team to learn first, to just learn about accessibility in their different roles, or as developers, as QA managers and stuff like that. And we've been always trying to find the right trainings, to learn new approaches with every project we've been working on. I've tried to find some learnings, some key learnings on how to improve our internal process. And that was really the first step. We have within the company, we have an accessibility champion program, and I think one of my driving goal was one of the first thing was to get my whole team part of this accessibility champion program. It's just the starting point, but I think within the company, I'm pretty convinced that except for the global accessibility team, I have the only team that's fully and completely part of this accessibility champion program. And over time, within our own group at our site, I've tried to expand that because we have also front-end and full stack developers that are not part of my direct team, but are part of other teams. And that has expanded to them. And I've tried to work on that topic. I gave some webinars, internal ones, and these had quickly expanded so that basically right now I'm one of the expert for the whole country in Germany within the company.
And so this education and center of excellence, it expands globally.
Yeah, the Centers of Excellence expands globally. So we have a global accessibility team on which we can rely on that is really focused on that topic only. And they are a great resource for learning, even for me, while my focus is more on development. But I can always rely on them to get support in every matter of the accessibility topics.
So when it comes to scaling your strategy, um, where are some of the challenges that you run into nowadays?
Um, I mean, depending on the application, one of the challenge is a technical one where since we're working on projects for customer, we never really know, or we're not always working on the same technology stack. So, the framework might change, the CI/CD pipeline might change, the tooling might change. So one of the challenge is to always adapt to the customer's requirement and to the customer's environment, and try to find the right tool to incorporate in their environment without being too disruptive. Because what you don't want is basically to force customer to learn too much, to learn new tools, to have to incorporate new tools into their process, because the more work you demand on their end, the less the chance is that they will stick with it. And the second part of the challenge is rather the social one, because you still have sometimes, when it's not a requirement, trying to convince stakeholders, being, lead developers or even product owners, that it's worth investing into accessibility. That, spending some more time, maybe some training from the team, setting up some test automation, that it's worth the effort. And that, like I said earlier, everybody's going to benefit from that, because one of the key arguments many times when you try to do that is that, yeah, but we don't have users with disability. And the answer to that is, how do you know? Because it's not always visible. And even if people have disability, they might not disclose them. And just assuming that you don't have users with disability is just a mistake. And worse than that, and that's something that we've seen along the way, is that usually when we are not able to convince customers at the beginning to do the work, you might still try to do the work anyway, a bit, without the full extent of implementing and testing for accessibility. But it's gonna come back at some point because with like right now with the new European Accessibility Act coming, we have a lot of demand to adapt software after the fact, and that's always what an argument that you can try to throw at people to say, yeah, you don't have to spend the minimal effort right now, but if you have to do it in a year from now, when your whole concept is finished, your whole application is developed, you might need to change your design, and that might mean code freeze. The cost is going to be exponentially higher than that.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what you had shared about, I think the second project in your career evolution, it was a 2-year project, and you didn't even get to 100%
Exactly.
accessibility. That was kind of a retrofit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in your opinion, like, why is the social adoption so low? Like, the the statement that accessibility and usability go hand in hand is, I mean, that resonates with me very well. Um, so why is it that initial upfront investment is questioned, and it's easier for brands to be like, oh, I'll just go back and retrofit if I in fact have to, and now it's like, well, everyone has to. So
Mhm. Um, I think it's a bit twofold. Partially, I'd say it's a bit of a misconception of what accessibility actually means, because I think something you hear quite often is that when you say, yeah, we have to think about accessibility, and the answer is, yeah, we don't have any blind users. And, it's like, yeah, but it's not just about blind users, right? It's about so much more than that. And that's the first issue, that people don't exactly grasp what the extent of accessibility means and what you want to achieve with that. The other part is probably a cost one. Because as soon as cost starts to be an argument, I've made the experience that people try to tend to cut the cost where it's easiest, and accessibility is one of the first usually, because it's something that you don't see, and very often design or user experience or user research is very close behind that, because it's the same thing. People without necessarily the developer experience tend to see that, yeah, we have a basic design, and we want to add a feature and just a few buttons, and developer can do that. We don't need designers. We can cut those costs. We don't need accessibility experts because it's simple. We can cut those costs. And that's generally a mistake, but it's the easiest way to cut costs without too much of effort, because you can still do it, right? It's not like you cannot cut the cost of a developers, because then you get nothing in the end. But if you cut the designer, you still get an implementation. It's not going to be a good one, but you get it anyway. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons that happens.
are we in a better place now than we were 2004 to be able to get to the end state of an accessible product or an accessible user experience?
Um, it's a
You know,
difficult
in
one.
one way you had
Yeah,
indicated like, well, the frameworks were simpler, but now there is more tooling and solutions to create accessible products. But you know, if
I
you kind
I
of look at the matrix, is it still equally as difficult, or is it easier?
no, I wouldn't say easier, but I would say it's a bit better nowadays, because it's easier for developers that don't care about it or don't know about it to mess it up, because of the extensiveness of the modern tooling. And the same goes for designers. Nowadays you have to make a modern design with stuff moving around, very modern. Everything has to look nice. And so the tendency is to create for developers to create rather custom widgets than to rely on native HTML. So that means that you have to build the accessibility into it on your own. So the chances that you break it is higher. On the other hand, I think that the expertise and the tooling is growing, making it a bit easier anyway to detect and to find out when you start breaking stuff. But in the end, is a bit of a compromise. So you have better tools, you have better expertise, and most importantly, I think the awareness of the importance of the topic is growing, and that's the most important one. And when you are a bit careful about what you are doing nowadays, I would say it's better. The state is really better today.
It's encouraged. I mean, that's encouraging. Um, how would you wrap that around some of the successes that you're finding with as you focus on accessibility?
Um, I think one of the biggest successes is that I've seen, I'd say in the last 2, 3 years, really an increasing interest in the topic. In most of the projects I've been working on, it was fairly easy to convince people to invest into accessibility. And when we started working on the application, to make sure that developers and designers both work together to make the solution accessible, and start in a discussion. Something we've had, for instance, in a recent project is that we designed together with the design team a mobile application, and they started creating a whole bunch of navigation processes and stuff like that. And at some point we had one key aspect with the swiping, which is basically fine on a mobile touch device, but the application was also meant to be used on a desktop and stuff like that. And we started to work together and say, yeah, okay, that's a valid approach, for instance, to make it a shortcut. But we need an alternative solution, for instance, for keyboard users or for mouse users. And that's the kind of collaboration that is really encouraging, and in my opinion, this is a success because it's working together, across diverse jobs to try and make the application better. And on the same time, like I said, really the approach that even addressing the topic, making the topic part of the testing, accessibility, including test automation for accessibility into projects is really growing, and people start really to say, yeah, I want that, and we need to have that, and that's really a good thing.
Maybe you're just getting better at selling it into the to the project.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, it's encouraging to know that it's easier to convince people. Hopefully, there's less and less retrofitting happening, and more upfront investment. And so, as you think about some of the disruptions that are coming into the accessibility space, what comes to mind?
Um, I'd say one of the disruption in the short term is something we are already feeling the effect from is the new European Accessibility Act. Because you have a lot of softwares, websites, web shops, and stuff like that that will have to be accessible by the mid of next year. And even if it's not yet addressing everything, because that's something probably impossible to achieve. But it's increasing the output, and especially raising even more awareness, because Customers are now asking for it. Shops are asking for it. And in return, what happens is that a lot of developers, even if they didn't have any contact with accessibility in the past, since the demand is increasing, the expertise in the development area and the design area has to increase with it. And it's a cats and mouse. As soon as the developer expertise will grow, what I hope will happen is that those developers will start to follow those best practices, even when they are working on projects that maybe don't have to pass any audit. But in return, it's maybe just implementing simple semantics and stuff like that, but that will already make future solution, future application more accessible than they are today. So I'd say that's probably the biggest improvement in the short term. In the midterm, I think what we are seeing already today is AI. AI is everywhere today. It's already in the coding space, having AI assistants working with you to generate tests to improve your coding or refactor some code is already something that's really, really helpful. But I'd say in the accessibility area, it's still lacking. And the reason for that is probably that since it's trained on existing code, and most of the existing code is not accessible, it cannot actually provide you with good hints on how to make something accessible. But, with the code improving over time, the Accessibility Act, training developer better, over time, the base for those AI models will improve. And my hope is really that the models themselves will therefore also be better and generating and suggesting accessible solutions.
I'm just thinking back to the EU act that you had highlighted. So many of the companies are going to be dealing with a legacy app that they need to retrofit. What advice? You've gone through several retrofits. What advice would you give to someone who's trying to retrofit and get to a state of reaching those accessibility goals that are outlined?
I'd say the reaching part is going to be the hardest. The biggest problem they're going to run in is that at the beginning, it's probably going to be absolutely overwhelming. Because if you do an audit on such an application, the results are probably going to be crushing. And, you have to set up a very good plan on how and where to start. My advice would always be to first start to make sure that every developer has at least a basic understanding on what accessibility is about and how to make small goals. Because what you don't want to do is have maybe one team of experts, trying to make your application accessible, while at the same time you have other teams creating new feature which are not accessible again. So this has to work together, right? You have a team that can, you have people working on improving existing solution while you have to make sure that the new solution are already better than the old ones. So that's one thing.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm dealing with that firsthand now with a client who's got 3 months to get this massive application accessible. But in the same vein, it's like, well, how do I overhaul methodology and process so that I stop, I don't know, garbage in, garbage out type
Mhm.
of thing? Like, okay, well, non-accessible code in, non-accessible product out. So it's without, and you can't, like you said, do you want to put a code freeze in place and halt business? So
No.
So your recommendation, if I'm hearing correctly, is to cure the process that's contributing to the inaccessibility and focus on that developer or even just anyone who sits in the content
Yeah,
supply of the organization.
absolutely. It's developers alone can do it, right? You have to involve your POs, you have to involve your designers, your QA. So everybody has their part to do in the process.
I love it. Well, as we reach the kind of tail end of the conversation, which incredible that 30 minutes goes by so quickly, is there anything that we didn't get to touch on or that you want to close out with that's important to you?
Um, yeah, I think what I'd really want to say is that, accessibility is a topic that's touching at some point everyone. And even if you don't want to be an expert on, you don't need to become an expert in the topic. It's really something that everybody should try to have a basic understanding of. And, every small improvement matters. So it's not, even if you don't have a fully accessible solution, already building a pretty well semantic solution. It's not just great for your SEO, it's also great for accessibility. So you can start simple.
I love it. And in the end, it's going to create that impact on overall usability, which I think is an easy one to say. Everyone wants to have the most user friendly product. So, Michael,
Yeah,
I want to just say thank you. So much interesting wisdom and knowledge that you've shared. And thank you again.
thank